Yet perhaps most significant is Nama's smiting pose. This powerful image, with the mace held high, will be endlessly repeated throughout Egypt's long history. This is a horrible way to die, to have your brains bludgeoned out. And yet, even this, the Egyptian artist can show in an almost ballet-like pose. It's been sanitized, it's been elevated to a piece of art, and yet the message still gets through. For the next 3,000 years, every one of Egypt's subsequent rulers would try and link themselves to Egypt's first pharaoh. To rule legitimately and successfully, they had to be absorbed into the complexities of the Egyptian hierarchy, both in this world and the next. So their names were recorded on a series of king lists, a kind of royal family tree. And the best preserved of these is here, in the temple of Seti I at Abydos. It lists himself and 75 of his royal predecessors, going right back to the very dawn of Egyptian history, with the very first king up there, King Nama. And the other important detail about this is that it's essentially emphasising that royal continuity, because Seti has his own young son, Ramses, the crown prince, actually reading out these names on a piece of papyrus paper. So it's as if Seti is saying to the gods, look, I'm now Pharaoh, and this is my son who'll succeed me to become yet another name on this remarkable list. In all, Egypt had over 300 pharaohs organised into 30 dynasties. But in the case of Egypt's earliest kings, being merely mortal was not enough. They needed to prove their divinity by exercising absolute control over their subjects. And the evidence for this was found in the desolate desert surrounding the ancient city of Abydos. This was Egypt's first royal burial ground, the original version of the Valley of the Kings. Now, being here, you get a real sense of the importance of this place for the ancient Egyptians. For as the wind funnels down this valley and swirls around the sand, if you listen very carefully, you can hear a whispering sound. A whispering once thought to be the voices of the very dead themselves. And here, Egypt's earliest kings were laid to rest within huge subterranean burial chambers. Like this, the location of the final resting place of Egypt's third pharaoh, King Jer, one of the largest and most complex tombs of the first dynasty. And although it's been recovered in sand, it clearly demonstrates the power that Jer still wielded, even in death. Jer himself was buried here in the central chamber, but all around are 318 subsidiary graves of his courtiers. Not only that, a little way beyond, many others were also buried. In total, 587 individuals accompanied this man into the next world. Which is incredible enough, but there is evidence of a more sinister twist. The fact that this tomb was all sealed over at the same time suggests these people may have been victims of ritual sacrifice, perhaps even ritual stabbing, as portrayed in art of the time. And certainly that power over life and death would give any king a godlike status.
The Fayum Oasis is a natural basin located southeast of the Giza Plateau that gave home to the Fayum A civilization during 9000 to 6000 BCE. These people lived in the vicinity of a vast lake and made their living through agriculture, hunting, and fishing. The people of Fayum constructed reed homes with subterranean basements for food storage. Cattle, sheep, and goats were domesticated, and basketry and pottery production flourished. During this period, tribal chieftains assumed positions of power, which may have been passed down to the next generation in a family or tribal unit. Communities went from tiny tribes traveling together to large groupings of diverse tribes living in the same region all the time. The Fayum A culture gave rise to the Merimde during 5000 to 4000 BCE, which was named from artifacts discovered at the location of that name on the western side of the Nile Delta. The majority of Egyptians were farmers, and agriculture was the basis of the dynastic Egypt economy, and farmers relied on the annual summer floods to grow their crops. We know that the first Egyptian farmers were hunter-gatherers. They planted crops such as wheat, lentils, barley, flax, and peas, in addition to herding animals. According to what was found on a location in the western side of the Nile Delta, the oldest levels of Merimdi Beni Salama that evolved between 8000 and 4000 BC, in addition to the Fayum Basin, both dating back to the Neolithic era. The Nile Valley's convex terrain encouraged the development of several basins, which in ancient times were flooded with floodwaters every year that brought silt and mud that fertilized the soil. These basins, of which 130 have been found, served as the irrigation system's reservoirs in ancient Egypt. Granaries were made of clay jars or baskets that were buried up to their necks in the earth. The El Omari culture, about 4000 BCE, developed on these achievements by building circular homes of higher complexity with plastered mud walls. All of these cultures evolved and flourished in Lower Egypt, Northern Egypt, closest to the Mediterranean Sea, whereas Upper Egypt civilization formed later. The inhabitants of the Badarian culture lived in movable tents, like their ancient forefathers, but preferred fixed homes. Following the Badarian period came the Amratian period, also known as Nakata I, which constructed more complex homes with windows and hearths, wattle and daub walls, and windbreaks around the main entryway. The practice of mummification began around 3500 BCE, where burial items were still left with the deceased. These developments were aided by the Girzian culture, also known as Nakata II, 3500 to 3200 BCE, which launched trading with other regions, inspiring changes in culture and art. The houses were built of sun-baked brick, and the more opulent ones included courtyards, an addition that would become commonplace in Egyptian homes later. The city of Abydos, located north of Nakata, became an important burial location, and huge tombs were built, forming a necropolis, a city of the dead. These tombs were originally made of mud bricks, but subsequently of huge, neatly hewn limestone. Eventually, this site would become the burial place for Egypt's rulers. Despite this, evidence reveals that individuals from all across the nation had their deceased buried at Abydos, and gave burial gifts to commemorate their memory. By this time, the cities of Zeus and Hierakonpolis were considered ancient, while Thinis, Nakata, and Nekhen were rapidly developing. The hieroglyphic alphabet, which was invented around 3400 to 3200 BCE, was used for maintaining records, although no entire sentences from this period have been discovered. At this time, the earliest Egyptian writing discovered so far originates from Abydos, and was discovered on pottery, clay seal imprints, and bone and ivory items. Complete sentences are not found in Egypt until the time of King Peribsen in the Second Dynasty 500 years later. This period led to the Nakata III period from 3200 to 3150 BCE. Following Nakata III, the early dynastic period and Egypt's recorded history began, with commerce, communities expanded and flourished, and the populations of both Lower and Upper Egypt increased.
In fact, the creation myth of the primordial mound was probably the model for the pyramid builders. The result is architecture in perfection. Then, in the New Kingdom, shafts carved deep into the rock lead to the final resting place of the rulers, most famously in the Valley of the Kings. During the late period, temple tombs become the style of the day, burial chambers beneath the sacred temple area. Most of the tombs from the early period are located at Abydos. Around 3700 BC, the first kings of Egypt are buried here. Egyptologists call this epoch the Naqada culture. The people of this era live from agriculture. Hunting and gathering hardly play a role anymore. In the course of time, a social order emerges, a development that is reflected in the cemetery at Abydos. There are smaller graves from pre-dynastic times, but then it becomes the burial site of the first rulers of a united Egypt.
We can observe quite clearly how, during the Naqada period, an elite cemetery gradually emerged. It reflects the social, economic and political developments that ultimately led to the establishment of a territorial state.
Die letztendlich zur Begründung des Territorialstaats führten.
This is said to have been the birthplace of the unified Pharaonic Empire. Hierakonpolis, the former residential city in the south of the country. Around the year 3000 BC, an estimated 1 million people live on the banks of the Nile. Yet at that time, only southern Upper Egypt is united under one ruler. His name is King Narmer. Historians have long puzzled over what may have happened at Hierakonpolis at this time. One thing is certain, Narmer is ambitious and wants to expand his power into northern Lower Egypt. According to ancient sources, the princes of the Nile Valley have been fighting each other for a long time. Narmer wants to subjugate the rebellious factions in the north and decide the centuries-long struggle for himself. So, were Upper and Lower Egypt united by force? A find from Hierakonpolis gives a clue. It was discovered at the end of the 19th century during excavations in the former temple area of the city. A slab of green slate, weighing almost 20 kilograms. The 5,000-year-old so-called Narmer palette tells the story of the king. The images show brute force and subjugated enemies. Mere propaganda, or indeed proof that Narmer conquered the lands of the north? The problem is, the slaying of enemies is a perennial favorite of ancient Egyptian iconography. Every ruler of Egypt has himself depicted in this victorious pose. It's simply part of presenting oneself as commanding unlimited military prowess and superhuman powers bestowed by the gods. The Narmer palette even depicts the cruel end that awaits the king's enemies. They are beheaded and mutilated, their penises cut off and placed on their heads as a final humiliation.
From the very beginnings of Egyptian culture, you see this motif of the ruler holding a mace, basically a big hammer weapon, and holding the hair of an enemy about to bash the enemies. What's this about? Well, it's propaganda. It shows you that Pharaoh is in control. And what's being depicted here is the motif of order over chaos. The Egyptians had this kind of a fear of things falling apart. This was a way to keep Egypt together.